Would God forgive this man? Many people who hear this case may believe the answer is no.
The case being told today is the Watts family murders, a family tragedy that shocked America in 2018. From the outside, this looked like a normal family. A wife, a husband, 2 little daughters, and another baby on the way. The main subject, a man facing personal turmoil, experienced a breakdown in his relationship, which set the stage for a profound and difficult outcome.
In the early morning hours, the wife, Elara, came home after a short work trip. She was pregnant with a baby boy.
Later that day, the wife missed calls from her friend. She also missed a pregnancy appointment, and that did not feel normal. When her friend could not reach her, she went to the house. She knocked, called, waited, and the silence made everything worse.
I haven't heard from Shanann, and she missed her appointment. And her car is still here?
Officers checked the house. The primary individual and the girls were not there, but her purse and vehicle remained behind.
I don't know where my family is. I hope they return soon. Investigators did not rely on emotion. They looked at time, statements, cameras, and the small details that did not fit. Then came the footage. It was not the full answer, but it gave investigators a piece of time they could not ignore. The first clues were simple, but they mattered. Missed calls, a missed appointment, a purse left behind, a vehicle that never moved. The investigation had grown larger. Federal investigators joined the search for Shanann and her daughters.
I told you, I haven't seen Shanann since early this morning. I don't know where she is. We understand, sir. We just need you to repeat the timeline. I don't know where my wife and children are.
Mr. Watts, can you walk us through that morning's timeline again?
I've told you, it's exactly the same.
Just tell us again, slowly.
To the public, he looked like a worried man.
To investigators, he was becoming the person whose story needed the most attention.
This will measure your heart rate and respiration. Just breathe normally. Understood. Then came the polygraph. It was another
According to the case, main undercover subject failed the polygraph. After that, the pressure inside the investigation changed.
Are you certain of your answers?
After the test, main subject asked to speak with his father. The mask was still there, but the cracks were showing. He wanted his father in the room. And in that private-looking moment, the story began to shift.
I kept thinking I could fix it. That's why I went back. I just needed more time.
After that, the investigation moved from searching for answers to confronting the truth he had tried to hide. The search then moved to an oil field location connected to his work. What investigators found there would confirm the worst fears. Investigators moved toward an oil field location connected to Christopher's work. The search was no longer only inside the home.
Every step had to be handled carefully. What they were searching for was a family that had vanished without a believable explanation.
On August 16, authorities found the family at the oil field site. The news confirmed the worst fears.
Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were gone. A pregnant mother and 2 little girls had become the victims of a crime that shocked the country.
The case was no longer a disappearance. It had become a homicide investigation.
On August 21, Christopher was formally charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder and unlawful termination of pregnancy.
The case then moved into the court system, where the facts would be placed into legal language.
On a specific date, the husband pleaded guilty to the crimes.
The death penalty was not pursued at the request of Shanann's family. They did not want any more death connected to this case.
On a specific date in late 2018, he was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole.
The public saw a worried husband. Investigators saw a man whose words had to be tested against time. Across America, people watched the story unfold. A wife was missing. 2 little girls were missing, and the husband was speaking to cameras.
The house did not tell the story of a normal departure. Important belongings were still there, but the people were not.
A case like this does not break open all at once. It begins with small facts placed side by side.
I left for work early. Where were they? I don't know where they were. Tell me the timeline again.
The neighbor's camera became important because it gave investigators something words could not change: time. The road began to matter. The home mattered. The workplace mattered. And every point on the map pulled investigators closer. Christopher's workplace was no longer just part of his daily routine. It became part of the investigation. The search moved toward an oil field location connected to his job. What investigators would find there changed everything. The focus narrowed. The search was no longer a wide question. It now had a place. Authorities later confirmed the worst. Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were gone.
The case was no longer about finding a missing family. It was now about understanding how one man's story had hidden the truth.
By the next morning, the investigation grew larger. Federal investigators joined the search, and Christopher's story began facing heavier pressure.
I told you I don't know where she is. She was gone when I woke up. Can you explain that again for the record? We need to go over the timeline again. What time did you last speak on the phone? She said goodbye before I left for work.
The more they compared his words with the timeline, the more the story began to lose balance. Then came the polygraph. It was another step in a case where his words were already weakening.
Did you return to the oil site after the girls were reported missing? No. I'd like to speak with my father before we continue. We can do that. Open the door.
He wanted his father in the room. I didn't know. I don't know what happened. This was the moment when the public story started to collapse. The subject was no longer...
After that, the investigation moved from searching for answers to confronting the truth he had tried to hide.
The subject was taken into custody. The man who had made a public appeal was now at the center of the investigation.
The next place investigators needed to search was connected to his work. And that search would confirm what everyone feared. The search moved to an oil field location connected to Christopher's work. That location became the place where the investigation would confirm its darkest fear.
On August 16, authorities found Shanann, Bella, and Celeste at the worksite area. A wife, 2 little daughters, and an unborn baby were gone. The case had become a tragedy beyond words. The case was no longer about a missing family. It was now a homicide investigation. On August 21, Christopher was formally charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder. The case then moved into court, where the facts were placed into legal language.
On a specific date, the husband pleaded guilty.
The death penalty was not pursued at the request of Shanann's family. They did not want any more death connected to this case.
On a later date, he was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. What remains haunting is not only the crime, but the mask. A man stood before the world asking for his family to return, while already knowing the truth.
And that is why the Watts family case still disturbs so many people. Because the danger did not arrive from outside the home. It was already inside.
Part of what made this case so disturbing was the image people had seen before the truth came out.
A clean home, smiling images, children's toys, family posts, and everything looked normal from the outside.
Behind that normal image, the husband was living a different story. One built on lies, distance, and a marriage falling apart.
Investigators did not solve the case with one detail.
They followed a chain of small facts until the story collapsed.
We just want them home. They're my whole world. Please, whoever has them, just let them go.
Thank you.
The camera did not care about excuses. It only showed time, movement, and the parts of the morning that could be checked.
The truck left the house around 5:30 a.m. I stopped at the site, then left, arriving home by 7:15 a.m.
The advanced assessment process, while not generating truth on its own, brought his narrative to a critical point where its consistency was undeniably challenged.
Your version of events, Christopher. It's not holding up. I didn't know what to do.
Once the story changed, investigators were no longer only searching for a missing family. They were documenting a confession. The investigation then led back to his workplace, the place that would become one of the darkest points in the case.
The truth was no longer hidden in words. It was waiting in the place investigators had finally reached. At the oil field location connected to his work, investigators found the answer everyone had been afraid of. Authorities confirmed the difficult truth. The individuals involved were no longer present. A pregnant mother and 2 little girls had become the center of one of the most heartbreaking family murder cases in modern America.
On the same day he was arrested, Christopher was also fired from his job.
The husband was arrested on a specific date. The man who had stood before cameras was now the center of the investigation.
On August 21, Christopher was formally charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder.
The case moved into court, where the truth was no longer only part of an investigation, but part of the legal record.
On November 6, 2018, the individual entered a plea acknowledging culpability for the grave events.
The death penalty was not pursued at the request of Shanann's family. They did not want any more death connected to this case. On November 19, 2018, the individual received a severe legal judgment, resulting in a prolonged period of incarceration. What remains haunting is not only the crime, but the mask. A man stood before the world asking for his family to return, while already knowing the truth.
That is why the Watts family case still disturbs so many people. The danger did not arrive from outside the home. It was already inside.
The legal ending was clear. But emotionally, this case left a question that still feels impossible to answer. The most disturbing part was how disturbing ordinary everything looked before the truth came out. People across the country watched the story and tried to understand how a normal-looking home could hide something so dark.
The case moved from missed calls, to questions, to interviews, to evidence, to a courtroom.
He did not look like a monster in a movie. That is what makes the case feel even colder.
The sentence ended the legal case, but it could never repair what had been destroyed.
Behind every headline were real lives, real families, and a loss that no sentence could erase.
Maybe that is why this case stayed with people. It did not begin in a dark alley. It began inside a home. Missed calls, a welfare check, a public statement, a failed test, a confession, a sentence. Step by step, the mask came apart. Years later, people still return to this case because it forces one uncomfortable question. How well do we really know the people closest to us? Whether forgiveness is possible is not for this story to decide. But justice, in this world, had already spoken. The mask was gone. But the question remained. How did it ever stay in place for so long? To understand why this case shocked so many people, one must return to the mask he wore in public.
I never thought something like this could happen in our quiet little town.
A person can say the right words and still feel wrong. Investigators understood that words were only one part of the picture.
Inside the home, nothing looked like a monster's lair. It looked ordinary, and that is what made the story harder to accept.
Online, the family image looked bright. But the investigation revealed a different story behind the screen.
The interview was not just a media moment. It became another piece of the timeline.
According to the case, the marriage was falling apart, and an affair had become part of the hidden story.
Help me understand how you spent your time that night. I've told you 3 times. Just tell me one more time. Investigators kept returning to the same point.
When the polygraph results came back, the pressure became harder for him to escape. With his father in the room, the story changed. What he had told the public could no longer hold.
The mask was finally breaking. And once it broke, the case moved from suspicion to consequence. On a specific date, the husband was arrested. The man who had asked the public for help was now facing the truth of the investigation.
The case had moved from a missing family report to a criminal investigation centered on him.
That same day, he was fired from his job. The worksite that had been part of his routine had become part of the case. On August 21, Christopher was formally charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder.
The charges reflected the full weight of what investigators said had happened.
The case then moved into court, where the facts became part of the legal record.
On November 6, 2018, the individual entered a plea acknowledging culpability for the grave events.
The death penalty was not pursued at the request of Shanann's family. They did not want any more death connected to the case.
The sentence was final: life in prison, with no possibility of parole. The legal case had an ending. But for the people left behind, grief did not end with the sentence. After the sentence, the neighborhood became quiet again. But the story did not leave people's minds. Years later, people still return to this case because it forces a difficult question. How well do we really know the people closest to us?
Missed calls, a welfare check, a public statement, a failed test, a confession, a sentence.
Whether forgiveness is possible is not for this story to decide.
He did not look like a monster in a movie. He looked like someone ordinary, and that made the case feel even colder.
Online, the family image looked bright. But the investigation revealed a different story behind the screen. The case moved through stages: concern, search, suspicion, confession, and finally, judgment. A courtroom can deliver a sentence, but it cannot return what was lost. Behind every headline were real lives, real families, and a grief no sentence could erase.
Maybe that is why this case stayed with people. It did not begin in a dark alley. It began inside a home.
The mask was gone. But the question remained: how had it stayed in place for so long?
People kept returning to this case because the outside image had looked so normal.
It was not a haunted house. It was an ordinary kitchen, an ordinary hallway, an ordinary home.
You're not picking up. Come on, where are you? Call me back, okay? What began as worry became a welfare check, and that welfare check became the beginning of the investigation.
This case shows how small details matter. A missed call, a missed appointment, a friend who refused to ignore the silence.
The camera did not judge. It simply recorded time, and time became something Christopher could not easily explain away.
That interview became unforgettable because the face on screen did not match the truth behind it.
In the end, the room did not need shouting. The facts had done the work.
Some places become remembered not for what they are, but for what investigators found connected to them. The law gave its answer. But the grief left behind could not be filed away in a folder. Cases like this should not be remembered only by the name of the killer. They should be remembered by the lives that were taken away. At the center of this case was not fame, not curiosity, and not the killer's name. It was a family that never came home.
A toy on the floor.
Would God forgive a man like this? That question belongs to faith. But what happened here belongs to justice.
The path was clear in the end. Worry, investigation, pressure, confession, and a sentence that would last for life.
Years later, people still watch, still ask questions, and still try to understand how such darkness could hide inside an ordinary life.
You try to put on a brave face, you know? It's the only thing you can do.
Betrayal is already painful. But in this case, betrayal became something far worse than a broken marriage. The courtroom could pronounce a sentence. But no courtroom could undo what had been taken.
A case should not be remembered only by the killer's name. It should be remembered by the lives that were stolen.
Maybe that is why this case still feels so close. It reminds people that evil does not always announce itself. Thank you for watching. If any detail should be corrected or added, leave your thoughts below. And remember, behind every case are real lives.
The file may be closed, but the weight of this case did not disappear with the final sentence.
People still talk about this case because it forces them to look at something uncomfortable. A monster does not always look like one.
A home is supposed to be the safest place. In this case, that belief was broken.
Affairs, lies, and silence can destroy trust. But what happened here went far beyond a broken marriage.
The truth did not arrive all at once. It came through details, pressure, evidence, and finally, confession. Justice can punish. It can name the crime. But justice cannot bring back what was taken. The story should not end with his name. It should end with the lives that were taken away.
This case reminds people that danger does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it lives behind a calm face and a closed door. This story was prepared from multiple references. If any detail needs correction or context, viewers are welcome to add it respectfully.
Behind every case are real lives, real families, and grief that does not end when the video does. Thank you for watching. Remember the victims, not only the crime. The court gave its answer. But one question still stayed with everyone who followed the case. Would God forgive a man like this? No one in this story can answer that. But what he did cannot be forgotten. This story should not be remembered only by the name of the man who destroyed it. It should be remembered by the lives that were taken.
A home can hold laughter, memories, and love. But after a case like this, even silence feels heavy.
People still return to this case because it forces a frightening thought. Sometimes the person closest to a family is the person hiding the most.
The truth came step by step. Concern, questions, pressure, confession, and a sentence that would last for life. Betrayal can break a marriage. But in this case, betrayal became something far darker than separation. The room did not need shouting. The timeline, the questions, and the pressure had already done their work.
Some places are remembered not for what they were built for, but for what investigators found connected to them.
Justice can punish. It can name the crime. But justice cannot bring back what was taken.
This case reminds people that danger does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it lives behind a calm face and a closed door.
Justice spoke in court. But grief does not end just because a sentence is read. Behind every headline were real lives, real families, and a grief that no sentence could erase.
This story was prepared from multiple references. If any detail needs correction or context, viewers are welcome to add it respectfully.
The neighborhood grew quiet again, but the memory of what happened there remained. Remember the victims, not only the crime. If any detail needs correction or added context, leave a respectful comment below.
Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and never ignore the silence when something feels wrong. Behind every case are real lives. Remember them.